Welcome to TechTO's Founder Journey series, a series where we dive into the untold stories of today's most successful founders and innovators. In each episode, we go beyond the headlines to explore the real story behind the business. We'll uncover how they turned a vision into a reality, navigating the challenges and celebrating the wins on their path to success. You'll hear firsthand accounts of the critical decisions, unexpected pivots, and unwavering dedication that shaped their entrepreneurial journey. Today's guest is Eldon Sprickerhoff, former co-founder of eSentire, a pioneering global cybersecurity company that he helped to grow to $1 billion valuation. In today's episode, not only does Eldon dive into his early years as a founder and what got him on his entrepreneurial journey, but also shares actionable takeaways for today's builders. All right, Eldon, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the podcast. We're excited to have you.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and I know you spoke recently at one of our TechTO events, and it's hard to kind of say everything you want to say about your journey in 10 minutes. So happy to go a little bit deeper today with you. One question I like to ask when we kick off is just kind of like, when was that first moment that you maybe saw an opportunity or kind of the spark hit you that you wanted to be a builder and do something on your own, and go all the way back? Like, what was that moment for you?
Well, I don't know if there was a single moment. My first job worked in tech at RBC, so it's right out of school, and I knew pretty quickly that the big bank was not going to be for me. I think I got 3.5 years there. Went off to a smaller software company for a couple of years, and then started consulting at Thomson Newspapers. And so that's sort of that arc where like I'm more comfortable sort of working for myself, and so I went down to New York and was working as a lone wolf contractor there for like during the .com era, right? The gold rush, the .com gold rush, and then finished up during the .bomb era.
So and you didn't do B2B, go back to banking?
No. So I was working at a prime broker down in New York that was working on hedge funds. So that was like, I guess, sort of a similar vertical, but sort of security based, and
Sorry, I want to clarify here. So
sure.
You went from RBC, and the prime broker you were an independent contractor for, or like that was like during the .com bust.
Yeah.
And for people that don't know, prime brokers, they're like the back office for hedge funds. And so what were you doing? Were you helping them like build their whole, imagine back then they didn't have any technology.
Yeah, exactly. So they provide back office services for hedge funds. So they're hoteling, and that could be internet power, back office trades, soft money. But I was working on the security side. So for the hedge funds themselves and for the prime broker themselves. Okay. So they were part of, it was ING prime brokerage. So ING, huge global bank, but this is a little sort of a diamond in this. So, and they, it's a very profitable little segment of the business, more profitable than pretty much any other part of the business. So, because all the hedge funds and the trading that was done there. So, and so I got exposure to sort of security techniques, and I built that up, and and even before this, I'd sort of part-time consulting gigs where I'd be developing software. That's for my background. So, database programming and, other little C, programming gigs here and there. So it was just sort of this sort of lone wolf thing. And then, came back, and it was, I know I can always go back to consulting.
Yeah.
I know what it takes to do that, and I did very well with that. I think I need to see if this thing can go larger. So that was the sort of the spirit of let's start a company, basically.
Founders Journey is a TechTO podcast, which is produced by Startwell on King Street West in downtown Toronto. With multiple meeting rooms and large event spaces under one roof, Startwell can host your SKOs, large all-hands sessions, offsites, executive retreats, conferences, and other types of meetings and events.
So RBC realized big companies weren't for you. And what was that about? Was it just...
So it was 91 to 94.
But like, what about it didn't you like? Do you remember?
It just wasn't the right vibe. I saw like look, I learned a lot while there, and I, there's things that I learned there that I still use today, right? And it was on the trading floor. So it was the first Unix systems. It was the first Ethernet. It was the first real-time trading systems that were done there. So there's code that I submitted there to the real-time the RBC automated trading system called RATS. I think it's been in use. It might not be in use anymore, but for the better part of 20 plus years, it was still in use at RBC. It just I got to this point where I just knew it was not going to be the right place for me, and part of it, I graduated in 91, and you're both young enough not to know that, but it was a recession, so bad recession. There would, Bob Ray was the premier. He had Ray days, and so I was lucky to get a job. Period. And then after about 3 years, the economy picked up, and I noticed that new grads were making more than I was making. And I found that very offensive. And so I left.
And so you went to consulting.
I went to the consulting.
You had, consulting, hypothetically, full freedom, but you have to serve the client.
Yeah.
And you say, now you say, okay, RBC, being an institution, wasn't the right culture fit. I've been independent, and I have this idea I can start something. So because again, there's now less degrees of freedom. So what gave you the confidence? Was it, I want to try building something, or I have an idea here? So what, you remember, what was that initial?
Sure. So on the eSentire side, that at this prime brokerage, I worked on systems and processes for doing the security service basically for them. And I didn't see anybody else doing this in the broader market, right? This is early 2002.
This was the identifiable opportunity.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's like, I don't see anybody else actually addressing this problem. Mm-hmm. And, I think luckily there were hedge funds that, like, this sort of the renaissance of hedge funds coming out. There were 4 or 5 that were doing incredibly well, and they were spinning out. And, from working at this prime brokerage, I'd met a lot of people in the IT department. And when these funds would leave the prime brokerage and become out of the hoteling, they would be looking for CTOs. And so the best people for CTOs were the people I was working with. And so there's this, they knew the job that I could do for them, and we can just go forward. So it was this sort of virtuous cycle of, you're bending over backwards for people that and you have the service that is sort of bank grade for smaller funds that had the same problems with compliance and security, but didn't have 200 IT staff that were available, and even security wasn't like cybersecurity. It's a fairly recent term. Right? It was called information security before. And not everybody was really thinking about it as well. So it was excellent timing, sort of lightning in a bottle to catch that at that time.
And that was 2001 when that all began.
The end of 2001.
Yeah. So
another great time in the market.
Yeah.
Tough again, and especially New York.
Yeah.
Right. It's like I was working in New York, and so that's it was. And look, I came back on the weekends, or my wife would come down. We had a kid in May. And so the dot bomb era was sort of March of 2001, and then 9/11 sort of maybe it's time to come home.
Yes.
So it was like so I packed up everything, turned in my TN, and came back home.
So you've now decided to make the shift to come back home, obviously to Canada, and you have obviously an identifiable opportunity from just years of experience. So kind of what is next step after identifying that gap? What did sort of the next phase of things look like in the building process?
Well, you assemble a whole list of your ICP, right? And so this is my background is comp sci economics. This is I may have taken one organizational behavior course at the university. So no MBA, no, just sort of a grind.
Yeah.
And so now I would call it, identifying your ICP and your product and go to market. But it was just, I didn't know. And so you just cram into that, right? You write down everything and you start speaking to everybody, and you figure out what is on the back of your truck that you can sell, and you figure out the best way to do that. And so a lot of that was burnt shoe leather, talking to other prime brokerages, and finding the sort of the early true believers and doubling down, bending over backwards to make sure that they were solving problems. And
I've heard that expression where it's like you find your believers kind of early on, and you grow within like that group or kind of that database of people essentially. Yeah.
This is all pre LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course.
And
like
so
how do you find these people then? Like, how are you going out? Is it just organic conversations? Are you attending things where you perhaps see people have a similar mindset or interest? Like, how do you find that?
Second part of this question, because was it just open-ended conversations? You were just trying to figure out what problems they had, or did you go with a hypothesis? Because today, if you read like mythology or any of the stuff that came out in the last 15 years, you'd say, okay, here's my hypothesis and let's disprove it. So here's the problem you're trying to solve. So did you go, was it, I have a problem, or hey, I know who I want to serve and let me learn from them what the problems they want to solve?
So I'm going to answer backwards.
Okay.
So I knew none of that.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So there was no plan. And so there's one person who was sort of my again, first true believer, Johnny Appleseed. And so while I was working at this prime brokerage, there's this one pivotal moment where there was an ISP that the prime brokerage was using that was going out of business. And there were two business units within ING that used them, the prime brokerage and then the investment management arm. And they were both going out of business. The ISP was going out of business. Both business units used them. And so they were going out of business very quickly. So they had a week basically to cut over. And so, I was responsible for the firewall and changes for my main gig. And then the second side business, they were looking for someone to switch over, to reconfigure the firewall and make sure everything is working. And it got sort of passed around the group because nobody wanted to take that gig. Mm-hmm. And so it ended up with me. And I just said, look, I'm spending Saturday on this thing, but I'll come in on Sunday morning and make sure everything's working properly, right? So, they took a risk on me doing this, but it was like Sunday came in, spent 2 or 3 hours changing all the configurations, making things that work. You should DNS is all working and so on for the cutover, and so I think that like it was charging like $60 an hour, like so it was like $200 some for this little thing, and then that team took me out to dinner. And the VP of that group, so dinner cost more than the consulting fees, right? And we, at the end of it, he's like, so what else are you thinking about doing? And I had this idea about the services and the offering that I've built around this. I think it could be for others. He said, I'd love to be part of that. And that was our Johnny Appleseed, where he would basically, it's kind of unheard of now that letting this sort of rogue Canadian, right, go wild in the network, doing all kinds of ideas of deep packet inspection and analytics. And he just gave me basically carte blanche and act as a referral, as a resource. So I've got these crazy ideas, and says, well, let's just give it a try. And
so you had carte blanche. And he was like, let's give it a try. Like, did you meet with him every few days, say, this is what I've done, here's what I can do? Like, how did you know what the first product was? Yeah,
and basically I transplanted what I had been doing at the prime brokerage into the investment management arm. And even back then I didn't know the difference between investment management and prime brokerage, right? I'm just still a techie, and it was just like as opportunistic as it could be. And you see that window open, right? This is where it's going to be. Take it. Yep. And I even then I didn't see where the growth of hedge funds and private equity and adjacents, investment banking and compliance was going to come. It was like, this is an opportunity. This is my best opportunity right now. And I'm going to do everything I can to squeeze as much juice out of that orange.
So just one digression here. For people not familiar with the difference between a hedge fund and investment management, can you just describe in your own words?
Sure. So hedge funds are, they're considered alternative investment management. So they're free to invest in pretty much anything. It doesn't have to be public markets. It can be any strategy. They often operate on a long-short methodology, which says their intention is not to lose their clients' money. So they will, let's say that they're choosing, that their strategy is long, short automotive. So they have a hypothesis that Tesla is going to do really well, but Hyundai is going to do poorly in comparison.
Yeah.
They will go long on Tesla, so they will expect that Tesla shares will go up, and then they will short Hyundai. And if their hypothesis holds true, Hyundai will go down. They'll make money on both sides. And if it goes opposite, they've hedged their bet. So, but they can invest in every possible strategy you can figure. Like that was part of the problem with the 2007-2008 meltdown, because they were investing in really exotic assets that were so difficult to understand. Nobody even now can unravel them. But they're able to make incredible gains if their strategies hold true. So it's not just public market. There's private pieces. There's art. There's bullion. There's exotic strategies that go crazy. But in the other, they're pretty much all registered with the SEC, unless they're family funds. And so there's criteria that they have to hold to from regulatory perspectives, and they have to financial fiscal due diligence that goes along with that.
Right.
So you're going with this first potential, your Johnny Appleseed.
Yeah.
You're exploring. What happened? What's the catalyst to taking the next step?
Yeah. So we, kept growing this, and just working on vulnerability assessments and looking for sort of the attacks in the here and now. And I knew I wanted to build a service around this, but it was difficult to persuade people right out the gate to use a service. And so, I used the vector of everyone had to do an annual vulnerability assessment. And so I said, well, we're going to do vulnerability assessments. The de facto assessment at that time was just on externally facing infrastructure. I said, well, let's look at internal infrastructure, and let's also put a network sensor in there to look at traffic. And so we'd scan for vulnerabilities on the outside, we'd scan for vulnerabilities on the inside, and look for network traffic. And as it turned out, we could find out more interesting things from the network traffic than either from the scans of the internal and external. And if we saw something unusual, we could alert them immediately. They didn't have to wait for a report to be made. And it got to this point where, so all of it was consulting in the beginning, and it went 90-10, because people would say, we thank you for the report. That was really good. But you got this, what you told us immediately when there was something weird that came up. Can we leave this sensor in place? I'm like, great. That's, yes, we can do that. So instead of just assuming it was going to be shipped out.
That's the growth tactic
that
right
was
there.
That.
Yes.
That was the stickiness.
Yep.
And it was funny. We would, early on when we had a couple investors who were interested, that we reached out to or had interest. And I think so this is, early 2000s. They want software or hardware, and we were a services thing, and they couldn't really wrap their head around it. Like hardware, yeah, we're fine. Software, but service we couldn't figure out. Then so we put that to bed and just kept to our knitting. And then we, a couple of years later, that's one of those investors came back, and they're like, we're interested in you. And so like what was changed? Like we're still doing what we were doing and billing the same way. And he says, well, no, you have an annuity. You have an annuity. And this is right before Bessemer came out with, ARR and all the definitions of recurring revenue and as SaaS metrics that came out. So, well, okay, that's a different animal, right? That isn't just sell once, or, you sell the hardware, you get it once, or a contract, and then software sales where you got the 20 points every annual thing. It's like, that's a different knowable,
you can model this out.
Defensible, right? So that was again, one of the pieces. I think there was a point as well where the SEC, so right after Target got hit with the hacking, and this is after Madoff, that whole fiasco as well.
Yeah.
The SEC started to go after hedge funds on cybersecurity. And I think part of it had to do with the fact that they'd missed Madoff. There's a lot of things that they sense were toothless in the SEC. Yeah. So they're like, well, this is what we're going to focus on right now. And they put 28 questions out for hedge funds as part of their due diligence, process. And at the time, we answered like 24 of them. And so that was like the best sort of marketing.
So regulatory change.
I could not have asked for a better sort of regulatory change that drove.
The timing was, it was perfect.
That regulatory change, were you ready more of a product business? Because it sounds like, hey, you led with professional services, consulting.
Yeah.
And then you had a retainer, what's called SaaS business at that.
Yeah.
When did you switch from that go to market? Because that.
It was, so it was before that.
Yeah.
Right. So it started off, 100% consulting and then 90-10 and then sort of 50-50 for 5 or 6 years into it. And then maybe 2 years before that regulatory changed, it was sort of 90% MRR or ARR SaaS based and then 10% consulting.
Tell me about that transition from like 90-10 to SaaS, because that's a completely different, for lack of a better word, go-to-market motion, right? One's like, hey, we'll come do consulting. Yeah. Oh, you've seen this product, we'll give it. The other one's, here's a product, I don't know if you're still doing outbound. I don't know if
Yeah. And so, even back then, we, again, incredibly poor sales rigor, right? It was, again, very much word of mouth. And, I brought in one salesperson who was, again, not really a sales VP, but just, a lot of shoe leather, and really happy clients, right? That said, here's a problem that everybody has in the industry now. This is what we're using. And other prime brokers would refer us, like, there's nobody else that's doing this as well.
Referrals, yeah.
And you've got this, this network, right? That. So part of the idea was, if we see an attack on one client, we automatically defend it against everyone else. So you've got this umbrella of defense, and it just sort of built on.
That's interesting. So you have word of mouth going. And I imagine also if employees left a hedge fund to go to a new one, they'd bring you there.
Exactly.
And you had a bit of a network effect, because the more defense you were doing, the more you could proactively defend.
Exactly.
So it sounds like it must have been smooth sailing at this point.
I don't know if it would be smooth sailing, right? You just have different problems at different levels, right? So I think before, I think we're 8 years in, and I'm working like a dog, right? And I get to this point where it's like, okay, I think we probably hit $1 million ARR at sort of 6-7 years, and it was a grind, right? Mm-hmm. It was just an incredible emotional grind, and I said, sort of my co-founder, like if something has to change, right? I think I've reached the limit of what I know, right? Because again, no business acumen whatsoever, and it was just grind, and no thoughts about a flywheel. Just
right.
I thought, but this is what I'm doing for the next 2 weeks, and I would work on that. And I had no idea of where we're going to go from there.
You were very like week by week with it all.
Yeah, two week delta was my focus,
how you managed
horizon.
Yeah.
And so we went out and we're looking for a CEO, and happened to find someone through the Ace Tech, which is now PureScale, right? Who I think he led the SaaS workshops in that group as well. So he came on board. That's J. Paul Haynes, who came on as our first CEO. And, he basically, I learned a lot about him. He has master's in engineering power systems. So great, sharp guy, totally dedicated to the cause. The right character, the right emotional makeup, right? Like a little bulldog, basically, to comfortable going up in New York, comfortable talking to investors, and so did our first little bits of raises back and forth as sort of the venture whisperer, and I'm always listening and watching and absorbing along the way.
Running a small or a mid-sized tech company? Then you need more than spreadsheets and basic tools. You need Sage Intacct, the all-in-one cloud platform for accounting, ERP, and financial management. From startup to scale up, Sage Intacct helps you grow faster. Automate your workflows, gain real-time visibility, and scale with confidence. It's more flexible than NetSuite, more powerful than QuickBooks, and delivers ROI fast. Up to 250% with payback in less than 6 months. Ranked number 1 in customer satisfaction for 8 years straight. That's not luck, it's Sage Intacct. Visit Sage Canada and take control of your growth.
Before we get into, like, you just, again, kind of teed up fundraising, which is great, and I want to go in that direction too. Just bringing on a CEO, what was one of the most valuable and impactful, like, lessons or takeaways that you'd share with perhaps like another founder that's going through that process? And like, what was so impactful for you just in your career with that?
I think, so there's a bit of an ego thing that you have to hold. If you are, the C stands for chief, right? And you can still own more of the company, but arguably you're turning that over to the person who ultimately makes that decision, right? Especially if you don't have a board yet. And so you have to be comfortable with that CEO. And I see, and so it's important not that, you can disagree, but ultimately you've got to come to some consensus and they execute on that decision, right? So there's an ego component, I think. I know there's a lot of
and there's trust too, just putting the trust in them, right?
There are some incredibly and I think I've seen a lot of early stage companies that bring on a CEO where, let's say they were a big VP of sales at a huge public company, and they're coming on. That environment's very different, right? The startup environment, early stage, is very different from a big public company that has had, dozens of people in their marketing department and, don't have collateral and don't
awareness and lots of resources.
Right. And if they're not comfortable in that same fight as you are, it's not going to turn out well. So we were just incredibly lucky. And Jay is still there as the president and COO to this day. I think he's put in 18 years, I guess now, right? He's still committed to the cause. There's so many things that could have gone wrong at any point, any given day. In the early days, and we've talked about this before at the TechTO, presentation of your chance of survival aren't great, and everything is always out to get you. And so you just, again, part of it is just that, you recognize that there's a lot of things you don't know. And you have to, interrogate that potential CEO before you bring them on and see how are you going to be working together, whether it's the next 5 years or 10 years, that it's, this person can, severely impact your growth, your life. Do they get along with your current clients? Do they understand where you're coming from?
Do they get along with your team?
Exactly. And there's so many little personal issues that come up with this, and there's no guarantee of success, even if they've had success before.
So how much of this were you aware before you made this hire?
None of it.
None of it.
But
this is just all learning.
But what I will tell you though is, it was getting so difficult. It was just the hours, the grind was so challenging. And I say this to Jay, I think I haven't told him, I didn't tell him at the time, but, I said, look, I looked at you and I looked at you as a life preserver. And, did I care what color the life preserver was? Did I look grungy? He was like, no, I staked
I'm drowning.
the future because I'm drowning from just exhaustion. And
you can't do it all.
I can't do it all. And I'm willing to go forward, but I'm staking everything on this guy. He didn't know it at the time, right? And I think I was trying to downplay the possible success of the company. But like I said, I had a horizon of 2 weeks. He could see what it could be, right? With a couple of years sort of vision, and he'd done it before, like a sort of serial entrepreneur that had he'd grown many companies to that sort of 200 to 400 person place.
So
and
let's just give some context here. At this time, you were roughly $1 million, you said?
yeah, $1 million ARR.
So now, fast forward 18 years later, how big roughly? Whatever you can disclose. Just ballpark.
In like what did we? The last disclosure that was public, it was 100 mil USD
So
ARR, and that was 2022.
Significant.
yeah.
So
So
18 years. Yeah.
here you are looking 2 weeks ahead. I got a great business that's doing $1 million, but I'm drowning.
Yes,
You made the lucky, right, whatever, hired
all of it.
CEO.
Stars all aligned.
Yes,
He could see 2 years ahead. So you probably saw 5 million or maybe
yeah,
10.
yeah.
And you're now at 100 or 100 plus. So it sounds like that relationship worked well. And how quickly after you hired Jay were you able to look more than 2 weeks ahead? How, and how did that impact how you saw everything?
It took a couple of quarters, right? And especially where I was, we were both sort of shadowing each other, right? Where he'd come to meetings with me and I'd come to meetings with him and things like this and get a sense as to where does this go to? And we ended up Vern Harnish, the Rockefeller method, which is like that one page of where you as a small company, where do you want to be, your big hairy audacious goal, and like
do you remember what your big hairy audacious goal was?
Yeah, our big hairy audacious goal was 1 billion EV, which at the time was
Probably sounded crazy.
Completely impossible. Like, and that was the whole idea, right? It was audacious. Like really, like I remember when it was just 2 guys, right, working on code and so on. It sounded completely, again, audacious, impossible. But that's the whole idea behind it. I remember again that very keenly. That's really like.
That's what we're gonna do.
That's what we said we're gonna do. So here we go, giddy up, right? So yeah, it was a very odd, thing that we came across, and like the number that we came to, but.
So 2 quarters, you're shadowing each other. Yeah. And were you also trying to figure out your roles, or was it clear from day one?
It was pretty clear. I think like I'd still been working on a lot of the sales pieces, but he brought in sort of sales methodology and marketing and all these things that we had excellent steak but no sizzle. The
business acumen, perhaps, that you were
right.
That was lacking, but
yeah. So some rigor.
Yeah.
Right? And that was the Rockefeller method. By Harnish, helped to sort of, let's just, what is the most important thing? How do we get to sales projections? How do we show efficacy with marketing push? And that kind of thing slowly, turning around. How do we trust each other in the management team and bringing in new people that believed in the cause and were willing to join and things like that.
Yeah. So just given, I know we're kind of looking at a large window here of growth, but when you did start to see things rapidly increasing, and obviously revenue was accelerating rapidly, what within the internal dynamics, did anything change? And what was maybe something you learned as you're now having to rapidly adapt to just it's taking off? What was a standout for you?
I probably the dynamics, people dynamics, right? Which was, I came up with this idea that every time you double your staff, you have a whole different group of problems. Yeah. And they're pretty much all people related, right? So, going from 2 to 4 and then 4 to 8 and then, up, what that looks like, 128 is different from 256. And so it was just very odd that, the tooling that you'd built originally, as a sort of a go-kart with a lawnmower engine, right, it's not going to do it anymore. It's not going to do it on the 401, right? So there's so much retooling that had to go in there, and not being sure of who juggling so many hats, right? Juggling cats, actually. So, while cats in a bowling ball and someone throws a chainsaw in there and just like, okay, what do I have to, what do I have to do to help move the company forward the best?
Yep.
And now I've got to delegate things out to other people. And I could do it myself, but I can't. And I have to be comfortable with recognizing that I think I would do this task this way. They're not going to do it the same way.
Yep.
Even if, I think I would do it this way, but probably not. Right. So I have to be comfortable with someone else doing that task because it is best for them to do it and not me. Right. And so I'd be very comfortable with sort of giving up, even though I know I could do that faster. I need to focus on the things that I am the best at to help move the company forward.
Yeah, I'm sure that must be difficult though, as like you have the conceptualized idea and it's like your vision is your vision, but it's not going to be perhaps exactly laid out in the exact roadmap you're thinking, because now there's other cooks in the kitchen, like whether you like it or not, there has to be, because there's just too much to manage.
And the other thing I remember, just because I can build it or we can build it doesn't mean we should.
Yeah.
Right. And there's so many things that, again, along the way that we just built things because we couldn't afford to buy it. But then there comes a point where, maybe we should have some wiki software that isn't just open source, because we need this kind of capability, search capability that doesn't exist. And we need integration into Salesforce, and that yes, we could, have a floor full of comp sci grads. Like, we could all build a pop machine, right, with that firmware, but we shouldn't in that same kind of thing. Like, what makes the most sense, what we should be focusing our build on.
Yeah.
So how do you determine that?
With a lot of arguing back and forth, right? There again, because you want to build, and it's like, no, this is I've got to decide, going forward, would this make 2 years forward? Does this make more sense from a reliability perspective, from a sales perspective? What does it make more sense to outsource it to some other group? And recognizing that there's pros and cons to both sides, right? And I think part of it is, do you really want to be managing this piece of code 2 years from now, 5 years from now?
Interesting.
Right? And, yes, the other business may go out of, like the company may go out of business, or they might get purchased by a competitor, and, you might get flack because you're using this resource more than, so you've got to weigh it. And I think every year you have to sort of readdress it. And is this still the best decision that we had making going forward?
So you're talking about, as you scaled, the team changed, sort of, you're talking about like the actual handling responsibilities, you're talking about focus. How about, was there a culture or mindset you brought to the company, and did that change over time, and what was it?
I think I got better at expressing the culture. I think so much it was not really ever said, but people would see me in every day, and in early, out late, grinding, and still very much connected to every, like, all in, every hand, and that was just dedicated to making sure the clients were great. I got better at sort of describing that focus. And there was a point at which there was a town hall that we had. So I pulled up, 4 or 5 different people from I had not told them I was going to call them up. So I called them all up. And so there's someone from sales, someone from the operation, like the security operations center, someone from, marketing, someone from HR. And I brought a dev, up as well. And so, what is your job? And I work on sales for the Midwest, marketing department, blah blah blah. And so the operations center was the easiest one, right? So we're looking at attacks and signals and intercepting the attacks and fighting hand-to-hand combat with the attackers. And I said, aside from the SOC person, I said, you've given great description what you do, but almost all of you are wrong. And so there's a laugh goes around with the rest of the company. I was like, it's like, so, you all have just one job, and that is to defend the client. Right. So how does sales
Defend the client.
defend the client?
Yeah.
I said, well, in order for us to continue to serve our clients, we have to grow, and we grow through sales. Without sales, we cannot survive.
Yeah.
And we can't survive. We can't defend our clients. So every aspect of that directly.
The motivation was built into every part of it. Yeah.
So, the dev who's working on this piece of code, it's like, you're not just working on a piece of code, you're working on something that pushes our mission forward to defend the client. And that's, again, the SOC, it's obvious they're dealing with the attacks all the time. But every single person, right, into HR, like, what is HR? Is to make sure that the employees are
It touches every
good.
corner.
Every single thing. It's like, this is finance. If we can't pay the bills, we can't defend our clients. But every single facet of that, like that elephant, right? Everybody's got their hand on an elephant.
Yes.
No, we defend our clients.
It always came back to that one concept, which is an important one that you highlighted.
I get goosebumps thinking about it, right? Like,
Great.
Because still, it's like, that is the only thing.
That's the reason to exist.
It is the most important thing about what you do every day.
So 2 questions. One thing you said there is you led by example. People could see you working, being there all the time.
Yeah.
There's this, 5 years ago, whatever, trying to forget about it. Work from home comes. So how do you manage a culture there where you can't now lead by example?
Well, you can still see you're always online.
Okay.
And look, there was a point, and it was for a surprisingly long amount of time, that every single alert or message that was sent out to the client, I would personally read. And so if there was something that looked unusual, I would make a comment into the operations center. It's like, this, okay, so, I want to make sure that when you're dealing with a case, you give correct information, as much valuable information as you would hope to receive from this. And so they would see, like, oh, wow,
nothing.
He's looking.
Yeah.
And, like I would, it kind of would look at times I would be awake the whole day, right? So if I were traveling, so I discovered, if I was in Hong Kong doing something, that jet lag, I would sleep in 4-hour chunks. And so it would appear, right, I would only be offline maximum of 4 hours, right? And so, if someone sent an email or a message, I would
quickly respond to.
I would quickly respond. It was like, this guy never sleeps, and that sort of thing. But it's like so, and this was, I thought it was very important for, you're dealing with people who have put incredible amounts of trust in your defense capabilities, in your visibility into the piece, and you're acting as that bodyguard that kicks out the bad guys. And it is something so critical. It's like, would this, here's this messaging that's coming out. Would this be valuable for you on one of the worst days of your professional career? Is this sufficient? Is this how you would like to have it handled? And so, like, that incredible sampling of, did you say everything you need to say? Mm-hmm. Can you do better the next time? Yeah. Was it accurate? If you made a mistake, retract quickly, apologize, don't cover it up, right?
Yeah.
And that's like that, but writ large.
Yeah. I think also what I'm taking away from what you're saying is, like, even though it was the work from home versus in person, it's like, no matter what the passion's there, it's like, it doesn't matter that you've reached the pinnacle, or maybe at the time the pinnacle. It's like, you're never checked out. People are just never seeing you be checked out.
And indeed. And there's one group, I think, at the time that during COVID, we spun up the labs group, and almost everyone in that group works remote, and we are comfortable with that. And that was actually a differentiator, is where we just want you for your insight and your focus.
Yep.
like the first time they actually got together was at the Black Hat DEF CON, where they, rented a big house, and like they'd never met face to face.
At
the
that
whole
conference,
group.
were they sure they were the right people in that house?
Well,
how they that?
well, that's like when you're working so closely together. It could go south, but it went well.
Yeah.
It went really well, and it was funny to see that sort of the dynamic as well, where the guy that leads that team, incredibly smart person, but they'd only met with them over like Slack and Zoom and Teams, and so it was again interesting to be able to get in there and see them sort of build the relationship that had that gap, right? Where they had you have a very stilted view of people if you only deal with them through text or your
digital screen.
Postcard size screen right on your screen. And so there's different working environments, and it works very well for that specific group.
Couple high level questions about the journey. Was there any particular inflection points that acted as a basically catalyst to future growth, or potentially were make or break that stick out from like that journey from 1 million to 100 million? Like,
yeah, we'd raised a round with a VC out of New Jersey, called Edison, and it was like a 5 mil USD round. So I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting. It was early, and then like 8 or 9 months later, we got a call in from Georgian, so in Toronto, early stage, so growth PE group, and so we've been following you, and we really want to do something with you. We really want to do something with you. Like, we just raised, we don't need this money, and so we really want to. And they were telling us, they're showing us what they do on the back office with their their tech side and how they can do this, and they just sort of won us over. And that was like, wow, this is even more like to your 2 weeks to 2 quarters to sort of 2 years perspective. Like, oh, well, that's I'm in love with my baby, but now someone says, oh, it's really gorgeous. Your baby is gorgeous. Like, well,
validating.
I thought so, but
yes.
wow, like I didn't know she was a knockout.
Yeah.
So that was probably one of the little, sort of asterisks that like, wow, okay.
Cool.
Like, that's, you don't get that every day. Right.
And was there like new product launches or new customers or anything else? Or are those like, or is it just like put one foot from another, hit our strategy? And,
there's lots of those little things. And like you're kind of sort of retooling every 18 months. Back then, I think it's faster now, but like you expect to have something like almost, you couldn't identify.
Yeah, there's nothing that says like,
18 months ago, like if you had left and you came back, because I'd have to be up.
And then you mentioned venture capitals, and so you took outside capital. Like, and what's interesting here is some stories, like some founders we talked to, it's all about bootstrapping or it's all about raising. You raise, you have to take care of the VCs eventually, they're stakeholders. How did that change your business? How do you think about exiting? How did that impact?
So it it gets much more rigorous.
And how far apart was it, like from launch to like when you did raise your first round, out of curiosity?
Yeah, so we had a couple loans like early on. So Michelin was closing a plant, and they had to put loan there to the local community. So we had a little loan there. We had a line of credit with the bank. You get some stuff from FedDev and along the way. And so we had like VentureLink did a very early seed round. That'd be sort of 10 years in. The to start the company, I put a HELOC on our house for $150K.
Wow.
And that didn't actually get paid off until the Edison money came in. So like that was like a good 12 years of running with a HELOC, because you don't know, and so I would not recommend that to anyone.
I imagine it's also not good for home life.
Carol is like an incredibly supportive, has been throughout everything, more than probably sensibly should have been. But I said, if this thing doesn't work, I said this from the beginning, if this thing doesn't work, it won't because I didn't try hard enough. Mm-hmm. You would never be able to say that I didn't put everything into it, right? So, so I think 10 years, almost 10 years before the first like institutional money that came in. That was like VentureLink and a couple other small, Al Karim Jivrev. So that's with Espresso, right? So before he called Espresso, he started Espresso was a small fund so he did very well.
What was that, shred financing, or was that?
Oh, we did shred.
Like so.
I've got nightmares about filing a shred on the last day of every year, right? Well, the post office is closing, early because it's the end.
It's much easier today.
Oh, I got sort of PTSD over so many of those like early stage things, but
but it got more rigorous, let you see further ahead.
Yeah, and again, very demanding, right? So when Warburg came in, that was the 150 million EV in 2017. That's one of the top 10 PE firms in the world, right? So very much instrumented. So on metrics, on growth, on the finance, all of that. So very, I think Georgian. Georgian came in before them. Still, again, they wanted rigor, but they were ex-operators. And so they wanted to see what we're doing on the tech stack and how we're moving things forward, and getting rid of tech debt and all of that. But once you swap into that really heavy duty growth equity side, it's very much instrumented, and you've got to show your numbers and prove. They look forward, they look back. You have a good quarter, you reach your targets. Of all kinds of targets, like, okay, well, you're sandbagging us, right? So we're going to, go harder.
More aggressive.
It's very serious, right? And pedal down, and you're as good as your last quarter, and
so that's it.
That's it.
Good reward for eating the pie is another pie.
Exactly.
Riley, anything else you want to talk on eSentire? Because I want to give some time to mentorship.
I was going to say and also your book as well. I would love to talk about Committed to, but just maybe like the exit.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should highlight that. So I can ask a pretty general question, like pre and post, just that whole process, like high level, huge takeaways on that side for you, and recos for founders.
Yeah, we had the last round. CDPQ and Georgian came in, and that got us to our, unicorn.
Unicorn, yeah.
I'm more, we cracked 100 million in sales. Yeah. Which
is more
undeniable. Yeah. That's defensible, right? I think the centaur, I think somebody calls it that. Yeah. And the market decides what something is valued. And so that was back in 2022. And, so, that was 20, coming into 21 years of the business. And, there was, a really good management team that had done this before. And I'd sort of, kind of itchy, right? Where it's like, I think I need to do something else. I put almost 21 years into this. And the way I was looking at it was, if as soon as your baby can drink legally in the States, you shouldn't have to be a helicopter parent anymore. And so, I took a summer sabbatical, and then just said, okay, I think we're done.
The time is now.
Yeah. It was like, and they signed me up for a contract sort of as an advisor. And so I do, blogs and talks and things like this, and come in and do some, on management retreats and things like this. So did that for a couple of years, and, still talk to them regularly, but, it's like it's a whole different thing, right? To walk away, kind of like you let your baby, right?
Yeah, and
Go.
some want to still be involved even after the process, but for you, it was just right to hand it over.
It was the right time.
Any recommendations about the process or how to do it or how to be, what the mindset you have to be? Because
I think it's best to be, can be open, and I think give enough sort of lead time so there's no surprises, that people can adjust as needs be. And then I think there's you shouldn't be surprised that how quickly you're replaced, right? And I think so much of it is again the mindset. Like I described, 20 plus years of introducing myself, Eldon Sprickerhoff, eSentire. Like that was my surname. Yeah. Right. It wasn't like that was, and so it's just it's I still have immense pride in what was built and what still goes on. And I still I talk about what is going on in there, and it's a tremendous success story, and there's still a huge future to it, and I want to see it succeed. I want it to succeed for everyone, like every stakeholder. Yeah, that's
for that one like target that you had about like defending your customers, right? Just I think that's great.
But it's like it has to be bigger. Again, that's part of the ego thing. It has to be bigger than me.
Yeah.
Right. And that's and part of that is just being comfortable letting go and letting other people figure out
what's next.
The best
what
thing.
their component is. It's a big part of it. And so like so much of it is just internalized. Yeah. And I've had some time to sort of think about that and personalize it myself.
Yeah. So we can definitely move on to kind of, unless there's anything else on the eSentire side, because we covered a lot, which is great. But what you're doing now is obviously still very much like focused on mentorship for founders and taking a lot of your like lessons learned and applying it in very actionable ways. So I want to talk about your book, Committed, which I actually is on my list to read, because I think despite me not being a founder or maybe a future founder, I find there's a lot of just great advice on like resilience and just life advice in general. So for you, why kind of do the next thing as writing this book?
So during that summer sabbatical, I started writing these things down because I'd been an EIR at Rogers Cybersecurity Catalyst out of TMU, and they would bring in these cohorts of startup founders, cybersecurity startup founders. And, when I started in 2001, there was no YouTube. There was like, I think Communitech was a year and a half old, 2 years old, right? Yeah. There was no, Wasserman I don't think had put a book out, right, on startups and management. So like none of this was known. And now there was no YC now, but now there's
no TechTO.
There's no TechTO, right? And so there was really nothing, and so there was just a lot of things I had to figure out for myself. I discovered, going on with these founders, that they're still making the mistakes that I made, where I could, they would come in, cybersecurity companies or founders, and the pitch decks were exactly the same, and they're making, and it would be something like, here's your title screen, cybersecurity is a 7 billion trillion quadrillion
there was nothing new
billion problem, and we solve the
everything
problem, and here's our team, we're looking to raise some money at the end. And
Alex is
you've never seen this before, right?
Sigh.
Before, no.
and so there,
no one else is doing it, right?
No one else. We have no competition, and
it's not a saturated industry at all.
And so it's like these passionate and mostly young, but not always young, right? And I've got this empathy because like, man, I was there.
The copy paste doesn't work.
And it's just even with all the resources that are out there, right? Bessemer and YC and TechTO and everything. It's like you're still, it's still not working. So like you're not getting it. So it's like I think I need to start writing down everything I didn't know, because despite everything else that's out there, I didn't think there was a book for a tech founder without a vacuum of business acumen. What does it take what does it take to survive? And I think the other piece of this is, we are addicted to good news. And, if you decide to go down this path of how wonderful startup life is, and everyone that's sort of fake it till you make it, or this false, like you go back to your apartment, and why am I not making it? Like, there's that addiction to good news, well,
people don't like delivering bad news either.
True enough. And it's like this, and so it's like, let's get released. That don't play house, right? If you're going to do this, it's serious.
Yeah.
You only have a small amount of time to make this thing work.
Yeah.
Right. And so it was like, I'm going to tell you all the mistakes, or as many of the mistakes that I had. I'm going to be really honest and raw. And so for, because I have empathy in what you're going through. I have been through it, and possibly worse. You don't know what's coming up.
Been through it at a harder time to build too.
Well, maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe. And so,
I think so.
No, so I'm gonna tell you. So it's funny. Alex and I were talking about this before, and it was look, when I had to write.
Mm-hmm.
Or when I started the company, I had to set up a room. So I had to get internet, and I had to be a sysadmin that would get file and print and internet and web server and all these systems set up. And so that's difficult to do if you don't have a certain competency. You can hire people to do it. Now you can just go to Amazon, right? Credit card, and I want to build a Linux server with a firewall in front of it. I can have that done in a couple minutes, right? So I don't have that moat, right? And so now this AI thing that appears to have legs, right?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Right?
I've heard of it too, I think.
It sounds like this, it seems to have some staying power. And I said, look, if you have this idea and you can code something over a weekend or in a month, there are thousands of people that can do the same thing. And so where's your moat?
Okay.
Right? And it says, just because you can do it means everybody else can do it in the same amount of time. And so I think it's, so after the talk a couple of months ago, someone came up to me because, I think I said, 5 out of 6 companies don't make it past 5 years or 10 years or whatever you're like. And they said, he said, one of the guys in the audience came up and said, I think your numbers, it's going to be better going forward. I said, I think it's going to be worse, simply because where's that moat? And the moat is engagement on knowing your end user and the data that comes that you have access to that no one else does.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And I said, getting to that point, I think is much more difficult. Right.
Okay.
And so I think just because you have this great idea, you've got to guard it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I actually think it goes back to your book, because I think the biggest mythology in tech, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is building a product is equivalent to building a company. I think maybe it was more true 25 years ago. You have that product that's working, you can quickly build a company, make mistakes. But now you have to go from a product to company much more. And I think what your book talks about is how you build a company.
Right. And
Right.
you've nailed it on the head. Like you can build a feature,
Yeah.
but a feature is not a product.
Yeah.
And a product is not a company.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's
It's just one step.
It's one little piece.
Yeah.
And, there's, if you're going to usurp the power of, these are larger companies, it's, who, like the DeepSeek, right? That messed up the ostensible leader, right? In on the chip side and on the AI side, right? So it's like if they don't have necessarily this moat, who does?
Yeah.
Right? We're this fintech event that I was at before the COVID lockdowns. was, I think it was out in Singapore. So this was right before COVID, and it was fintech. So they had, Visa and Stripe and all these big players. And the Singapore government had put together, they had 50 slots for startups. And so of the 50, so they get $100K a piece and then they got a 10 by 10 booth. Yeah. And so I walked around to every single one of them, and 48 of them were all blockchain companies, completely indistinguishable from one another. They were all blockchain, AML, KYC, and it was like absolutely no difference between.
No slight variation in any of the business model.
Only two of the other companies in that 50 block 10 by 10 startup zone were non-blockchain.
Interesting.
AML, KYC, and so we're in the same sort of situation, right?
Much larger. It's across everything.
Exactly. It's like, so how
everything is saturated at this point.
Everything, yeah. And so it comes down to
knowing what you know now, and starting as eSentire, 25 years ago plus.
Yeah.
If you were to start a business now, what would you do completely different given AI and the market?
If you were doing this today,
if I were doing something today,
yeah.
I would probably talk to so many people, right? That had pockets.
Yeah.
Right.
For people that can't see, that was the money symbol.
Money symbol.
Yeah, the pocket's full of money.
Show me the money. Yes.
Yeah. And so walk me through your day. What is the biggest pita in your day that you would love to have replaced if you could? And not that money is no object, but we're like, what is that? And then figure out, okay, what would it take to solve in this niche? And so, health and wealth are the two biggest pockets, right? Especially now. And I think adjacents into legal compliance pieces was like, that is, I would try to find what is that niche, super niche thing that is causing the most number of people the most problem. What would that take? What would it take to make that problem go away and not go wide, go super, super niche, and just try to own that thin
and go from there.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think that's really good advice.
Questions?
I guess just perhaps like what you see yourself like kind of focking on.
Where do I see myself in 5 years?
Maybe 5 years, 10 years. You can look as far ahead as you want. Or just your focus. What's really important to you right now?
I was listening to a webcast a couple weeks ago. It was they had Joe Canavan, right? Yeah. So he's just the Angel of the Year, right? So I guess it was Beta Kit, right? So the interview that just came after his win, and I've said before that I want to be the Rick Rubin of Canadian cybersecurity, right? So just that tweaks things, and so that I've been saying that for years. But Joe mentioned that we need more Canadian billionaires.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, that is exactly right. And I'm not a political animal. I have no interest in sort of getting into that, trying to plead my case in Ottawa or at Queen's Park or anything like that. So it's like, what can I do personally that helps move the needle and ultimately helps Canada be more of a success globally from a cybersecurity perspective? And, I think we need more Canadian millionaires, and those things coincide. If I can help juice it, and that's like part of the thing that came out with the book. It was like, it's possible. There's a lot that has to be done. But it's like, these are the mistakes. I'm being very transparent and honest about the mistakes I made. Go make different, more exciting mistakes. Recognize that it's going to be a commitment on your time and your family and your mental health and physical, and you have to take care of all these things. But ultimately, I'd like to see more people succeed.
I love that.
I will keep on doing that until it's time to tap
Fighting
out.
the good fight. I love it.
You're gonna get 45 emails a day after this podcast.
And it's so it's an odd thing, right? Part of the, I'm pretty introverted. I think anybody who really knows me knows that's the case. And so what's funny is like a part of the book, the idea behind the book was like, so I can keep my sort of
Read the book first.
introverted self, right? But with the publicity piece, it amplified.
Of course.
So like, just look, so I have my own coping skills of dealing with that, and so part of it is, somebody emails me, and I was like, look, what do you want to talk about? Give me, sort of the 5 bullet points that you want to talk about. Instead of they pick your brain, virtual coffee or whatever.
Yeah.
There's just too much, and I have to put up sort of guardrails to reinforce my own stuff. And so that request, about half people don't go through that. So then the other half, they'll go through the questions, and I said, look, 95% of what you're asking
is in the book.
It's in the book. I wrote but no, you might not like to read, but I can't be the chat Eldon version of the book where you ask the question, I give you the answer,
Chat Eldon,
right?
yeah.
It's like I wrote it down so I could sort of scale this kind of
An element is also finding like it out for yourself too. It's like, of course, that's the resource, and that's you want to be accessible, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
And like I said, and I don't do a lot of podcasts, right?
Well,
I
thank
don't
you.
do a lot
We're
of
very
podcasts,
grateful to have you. Thank you.
You know how I feel about TechTO and what your mission is and how you've been doing it. So
Well,
I'm very pleased to have got
We're
this.
very
input
aligned
today.
with what
Thank
Joe
you.
Caravan said and what you want to accomplish, right? Like
Yeah.
we do this because we want more successful startups, which leads to more wealth for the country.
Yeah.
Amen.
On that note, Eldon, thank you again so much.
Thank you.
This has been a pleasure.
My pleasure.